I kept my mouth shut for years until the day they kicked me out of the sanctuary I bought with 30 years of sweat. They think stripping me of a roof wins the war, but they are wrong. I do not just hold the keys to the front door. I hold the keys to the secrets that'll crumble their perfect little family. His shame was not an insult. It was his final, fatal mistake. My name is Evelyn Hart. I am 57 years old, a widow, and to the outside world, I am entirely unremarkable. I have spent my life mastering the art of being invisible. I work as a senior processor at the Northbridge Federal Benefits Coordination, a grey government agency where dreams go to be filed in triplicate. I earn $60,000 a year. I never told my daughter, Megan, the true figure. I let her believe it was less. I let her believe I was barely scraping by because I was terrified that if she knew I had money, she would judge me for being merely average instead of struggling. I thought silence was safety. I was wrong. I was spending the weekend at my sanctuary, a townhouse in Harbour Point, Delaware. The salt air usually cleared my head, but today the atmosphere inside felt heavy. This house was not a gift from a wealthy relative or a lucky lottery ticket. It was the result of 30 years of skipped lunches, mended coats, and silent discipline. I knew every inch of this place because I had laboured over it. I had sanded the oak floorboards until my knuckles bled. I had painted the crown moulding in the hallway while balancing on a stepladder at 2 a.m. This was the only place on earth where I did not have to shrink myself to fit into a box. My phone buzzed on the granite countertop. It was a video call from Megan. I wiped my hands on a kitchen towel and tapped the green button. Megan's face filled the screen, pixelated slightly by the connection. She looked exhausted, her makeup hiding dark circles that I knew were not there a month ago. Behind her stood her husband, Derek Vaughan. He was leaning against the doorframe, wearing a cashmere sweater that probably cost more than my monthly utility bill. He looked polished, like a man who had just stepped out of a magazine advertisement, but his eyes were cold. They were shark eyes. Derek stepped forward, invading the frame. He did not say hello. He looked at the background of my video, noting the high ceilings and the view of the water. "Your mother," Derek said, his voice dripping with a casual cruelty that he disguised as amusement. "She is an average wage earner living like the rich. I am ashamed for her. It looks ridiculous." My chest tightened, but I kept my expression neutral. Before I could respond, Megan looked over her shoulder nervously. "Mom," Megan said, her voice thin. "Derek's mother. She just arrived. It was a surprise visit." Derek cut in, his tone shifting from mockery to command. "My mother is here. Evelyn. You need to leave. Go to a hotel. We need the townhouse for the weekend to host properly. We need to maintain a certain image, and having you there, it confuses the narrative. You understand? He was kicking me out of my own house. He was telling me to vacate the property I paid for so he could play the lord of the manor for his mother." I looked at Megan. She was studying her shoes, unable to meet my gaze. She was fading away, bit by bit, under the weight of his personality. I did not argue. I did not remind him whose name was on the deed. I did not scream about the 30 years of labor that built the walls he was standing in. "Okay," I said. The word was simple, but my voice was completely flat. It lacked the usual motherly warmth or the apologetic tone I had used for years. Megan's head snapped up. She blinked, a flicker of unease crossing her face, as if she had just heard a stranger speak with my voice. "Good," Derek said, satisfied that he had once again managed the help. The screen went black. I stood in the silence of my kitchen. I ran my hand over the cool granite counter. I looked at the wall where I had carefully touched up a paint scratch just yesterday. He thought he had won. He thought I was leaving because I was weak. I was not leaving because I was weak. I was retreating to higher ground. I reached for my phone again. I did not open the hotel booking application. Instead, I opened my email archive. I scrolled past the bills and the newsletters until I found a message from 4 years ago. It was marked with a yellow star. It was a document I had received by accident. A digital breadcrumb trail leading to a part of Derek's life he thought was buried. I had never used it. I had hoped I would never have to. I dialed a number I knew by heart. Miles Carver answered on the second ring. He was a lawyer, an old friend, and the only person in the world who knew that Evelyn Hart was not just a soft, pushover grandmother. Evelyn, Miles said, his voice rough with sleep. "Is everything all right?" "No," I said, my voice steady and cold. "They just kicked me out of the townhouse. Derek wants to play house with his mother." There was a pause on the line. Miles knew what I had in my arsenal. "Evelyn," Miles said, his tone dropping an octave. "Are you sure you want to open that box?" I looked out the window at the grey ocean, feeling the resolve harden in my stomach like concrete. "I opened it a long time ago," I said. "I am just using it today." As I drove away from Harbour Point, the silence in the car was suffocating. It gave me too much time to think about the years I spent breaking my back, so Megan would never have to. I worked 2 jobs for 15 years. I remember the smell of industrial cleaner on my hands that no amount of lavender soap could mask. I missed her 4th grade play because I had to cover a shift. All so I could put money into an account she never saw. I taught her one thing over and over, and Megan, I would say, grabbing her shoulders when she was a teenager. Never rely on anyone to feed you. If you do not own the table, they can take away your chair. She listened until she met Derek. He was smooth. He knew which fork to use for salad and which wine went with fish. He looked at my rough hands and saw a servant, not a survivor. He treated me like an embarrassing relative from the countryside who did not know how to behave in civilized society. I remember the dinner where I served beef stew. It was my mother's recipe, rich and comforting. Derek took one bite and put his spoon down. "It is very hearty." "Evelyn," he had said, wiping his mouth with a napkin as if he had touched poison. "But perhaps next time. We could order from a place that uses less aggressive spices." He corrected my pronunciation of croissant in front of his friends like he was training a dog. He made me feel small in my own kitchen. I never told them I made $60,000 a year. To Derek, that amount was pocket change, a salary for people who did not matter. People who make $60,000. He once told me while checking his reflection in the hallway mirror, should not dream of standing in the same room as the successful. It is confusing for everyone. It blurs the lines. So I let him think I made less. I let him think I was poor so he would stop counting my money. This townhouse was the only thing I kept for myself. It was not an asset to leverage. It was the place where I could breathe without feeling his judgment. But Derek never saw it that way. I remember last Thanksgiving. He was standing on the balcony, looking out at the water with a glass of scotch in his hand. "You know," he had said, gesturing to the horizon with a possessive sweep of his arm. "Eventually, this place will be Megan's. And since Megan is my wife, Well, it keeps it all in the family. He said it as a joke, but his eyes were calculating the square footage. He spoke about the future as if it were a contract I had already signed. That was when the first crack appeared in my blindness. A few months ago, I saw a folder on his desk. He was signing papers for a company I had never heard of, something vague and corporate. When I asked about it, Megan snatched the folder away. "Mom," she had said, her voice tight with a defensive edge I had never heard before. "Stop prying. Derek is handling our investments. You do not understand high finance. Just let him handle it." I stayed silent because I wanted her to be happy. I swallowed the insults. I played the role of the quiet, simple mother. But today, they pushed me out of my own door. They mistook my silence for submission. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I do not need them to love me. I whispered to the empty car, watching the road blur ahead. I need them to respect boundaries. The motel room in Brenton Ridge was clean, but the carpet smelled of stale lemon cleaner and the air conditioning unit rattled like a dying engine. It was a mechanical, grinding noise that filled the silence of my displacement. I sat on the edge of the stiff mattress and opened the social media application on my phone. The first image on my feed was Derek. He was standing on the balcony of my townhouse, a glass of expensive red wine in his hand, the sunset painting the sky purple behind him. The caption was a knife to the gut. "The Vaughan family finally has a retreat worthy of our status." He did not call it a visit. He called it a retreat for the Vaughan family. I swiped right. Megan had posted a story. She was holding a drink and smiling. But the smile did not reach her eyes. Her eyelids were puffy and red. She looked like a woman who had been weeping in the bathroom moments before the camera turned on. I did not leave a comment. I did not send an angry emoji. I took screenshots of every post, every caption, and every timestamp, and I saved them to a secure folder. A notification banner slid down from the top of the screen. It was a text from Derek. "Send the Wi-Fi password and the spare key code. Also, forward the utility bills. We will manage the accounts from now on to keep things tidy." He was not just occupying the space. He was attempting to erase my administrative existence. I typed my reply with steady fingers. Of course. I sent the Wi-Fi password. Then I sent the guest code for the front door. The specific code I knew was programmed to expire in 48 hours. I attached a photo of the electric bill, but I cropped the image so the account number and the auto-pay pin were cut off. I gave him the illusion of control while I kept the actual reins in my hand. My phone buzzed. It was Miles. "You need them to say it?" "Evelyn," Miles said, his voice sharp and clear. "I need proof that they are claiming ownership and that they forced you out. Don't interrupt them. Let them dig the hole." "I have the screenshots," I said. "He is publicly claiming it is the Vaughan family retreat." "Good," Miles replied. "But we need to lock down your standing. Do you have anything that proves you are the sole operator of the property?" I stared at the motel wall, the security contract, and the insurance. Both are in my name. I hung up and dialed Rita Sloane. She had been the building manager at Harbour Point for 20 years before she retired. She knew every wire and sensor in that complex. "Rita," I said, "I need to know if the hallway cameras are recording." "Evelyn," Rita said, her voice dropping to a low, serious tone. "I saw him go in. That son-in-law of yours. He walks like he owns the pavement. You need to be careful." "Derek," He looks like the type who would file a quitclaim deed with a forged signature just to create a fait accompli situation. Watch your back. Her words made the hair on my arms stand up. A forged deed. It was exactly the kind of shortcut Derek would take. I needed air. I walked out of the room toward the motel lobby to get ice. As I passed the front desk, the clerk was sorting through a stack of mail that had been returned or left behind by previous guests. A white envelope sat on top of the pile, ready for the trash. The name on it stopped me cold. Derek Vaughan. I froze. Why would my son-in-law, who claimed to be so wealthy and refined, have mail sent to a $40 a night motel off the highway? I looked closer at the return address. It was from a frantic, high-pressure debt collection agency. He must have used this address as a hiding spot to keep his financial bleeding secret from Megan. I stared at the envelope. He had kicked me out of my home to hide his shame. But he had sent me straight to the place where he buried his skeletons. I did not open the envelope. I knew the laws regarding mail tampering better than most, and I refused to give Derek a legal foothold to use against me. Instead, I took a photograph of the return address and typed the name of the collection agency into the public court records database on my tablet. The screen refreshed, pulling data from the Kingsport County Clerk's office. There it was. Derek Vaughan was listed as a defendant in a civil lawsuit from 3 years ago. The case involved unpaid contract fees and a dispute over liability. It was not a simple misunderstanding. It was a pattern. I called Miles immediately. I found a docket in Kingsport. I said, my voice low. He was sued for non-payment. Civil records are fair game. Miles replied, the sound of papers rustling in the background. If he is hiding financial distress while playing the rich husband, this is the leverage we need. It proves he is desperate. I hung up and switched applications to my email. I found the message I had starred years ago. It was from a woman named Tessa Bloom, a junior associate who had worked with Derek briefly before disappearing from the industry. The subject line was simply, I am sorry. I dialed the number she had left in the signature block. It rang 4 times before a hesitant voice answered, Hello, Tessa. I said gently. This is Evelyn Hart. You sent me an email a long time ago. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. I didn't think you would ever call. Is Derek in trouble? He is trying to take my home, I said. I need to know what happened back then. He made us sign for him, Tessa whispered, her voice trembling. He told me it was just bureaucratic nonsense. He said, Tessa, don't be so rigid. Just sign it so we can go home. But when the money went missing, he said I was the one who authorized the transfers. I will not use your name publicly. I promised. But I need the old threads. Can you send me what you have? Okay, she said, sounding relieved. I will send the scans. As the files started landing in my inbox, another notification popped up. It was from Rita. She had sent a video clip from the hallway camera at the Harbour Point townhouse. The timestamp was from this morning, just 2 hours after I had left. The video showed Derek standing at my front door. He was not alone. Next to him stood a man in blue coveralls, holding a heavy tool bag. Derek was pointing at the lock mechanism and gesturing broadly. They were not just visiting. They were preparing to occupy the property permanently. They were likely changing the locks or installing their own security to lock me out for good. I forwarded the video to Miles. He is bringing in contractors, Miles said, his tone hardening. This is no longer a family dispute. This is an unauthorized seizure of property. I am drafting a notice to vacate. We give them 2 hours to leave the premises before we involve the sheriff. 2 hours, I repeated. Evelyn, Miles said, a note of caution entering his voice. If you walk in there right now, Derek will twist it. He will call the police and say you are harassing a young couple. He will make you look unstable. I stood up and grabbed my coat. I checked my bag to ensure I had the printed deed, the utility bills in my name, and the freshly downloaded court records from Kingsport. Then I will not walk in as a victim, I said, opening the motel door to the harsh sunlight. I am walking in as a landlord with a file. Miles and I pulled into the driveway of the townhouse just as the sun was beginning to dip below the horizon. The windows were glowing with warm light, and I could hear the faint sound of jazz music drifting out to the street. It looked like a picture from a catalogue, a perfect domestic scene that I was paying for but was excluded from. My stomach twisted, not with fear, but with a cold, hard anger. I walked up the steps with Miles right beside me. He carried a leather briefcase that looked heavy with intent. I rang the bell. The door swung open, and Derek stood there. He was holding a crystal tumbler half full of amber liquid. When he saw me, his smile faltered for a fraction of a second, but he recovered instantly when he noticed the man in the suit standing next to me. "Evelyn," Derek said, his voice smooth and welcoming, though his eyes were narrowing into slits of warning. "And a guest. We are having a small family gathering. I am not sure if now is the best time. We are not here for the hors d'oeuvres." "Derek," I said, stepping past him before he could block the way. The interior of my sanctuary was unrecognizable. My favorite reading chair had been shoved into a corner to make room for a makeshift bar. There were 3 distinct squares of dark blue paint swatched directly onto my cream-colored living room wall. They were testing colors. They were marking territory. The kitchen island, which I kept pristine, was cluttered with half-empty wine glasses and trays of food. It felt less like a party and more like an invasion. 2 older people were sitting on the sofa. They looked up, startled by our entrance. "Mum, Dad," Derek said, closing the door behind us with a little too much force. "This is Evelyn, Megan's mother, and her friend." The woman, who I assumed was Marla Vaughn, stood up. She was dressed in pearls and silk, beaming with a genuine warmth that made my stomach turn. "Oh," Evelyn Marla exclaimed, reaching out to shake my hand. "It is so lovely to finally meet you. Derek has told us so much about your generosity, and this house. It is just magnificent. Gordon and I were just saying what a wonderful wedding gift this is for the children." I froze. A wedding gift. Beside me, Miles cleared his throat. He did not smile. He opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick document stamped with the county seal. "Mrs. Vaughn," Miles said, his tone polite but sharp as a razor. "My name is Miles Carver. I am Mrs. Hart's attorney. I believe there has been a significant misunderstanding. This property is not a gift. It is solely owned by Evelyn Hart, and she has not transferred the deed to anyone." The room went dead silent. Marla's smile evaporated. She looked at Derek, then at me. "But," Marla stammered. Derek said, "He said you gave them the keys. He said you wanted them to start their life here." Derek laughed, a nervous, jagged sound. "It is just semantics. Mum, Evelyn and I have an understanding. We are family. What is mine is hers. Right family does not mean I get kicked out of my own house," I said. My voice was quiet, but it carried across the room. Derek's face flushed a deep red. You are making a scene. Evelyn. You are embarrassing, Megan. You embarrassed yourself when you posted this, I said, holding up my phone. The screen showed the photo of him on the balcony, claiming the house for the Vaughan family. Miles tapped his phone, and a small red light indicated he was recording the conversation, which was perfectly legal in our jurisdiction. Mr. Vaughan, I need to ask you directly. Who invited you and your guests to enter this property after Mrs. Hart left? Derek's eyes darted around the room, looking for an exit. He turned to Megan, who was standing by the kitchen archway, looking like she wanted to melt into the floor. Megan, Derek said, his voice dropping into that commanding, manipulative register he used so well. Tell them. Tell your mother that we discussed this. Tell them you said she agreed to let us have the place. Megan looked at me, then at Derek. Her lip trembled. She was trapped between the man she married and the truth she knew. I. Megan stuttered, unable to form the lie. Miles did not wait for her to break. He pulled a folded piece of paper from his file and held it up for everyone to see. It was a still image printed from the security footage Rita had sent. Mr. Vaughan, Miles said, his voice dropping the pretense of politeness. If you believed this house was yours by agreement, then why did you bring a locksmith here at 10 in the morning to drill out the front door cylinder? When were you planning to change the locks? Derek stared at the photo. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush him. That was a plumber, Derek said quickly, waving a dismissive hand at the photograph Miles was holding. The faucet in the upstairs bathroom was leaking. I was doing you a favor by calling someone in to fix it before it ruined your precious floorboards. My phone buzzed in my hand. It was another message from Rita. She had sent a high-resolution still image from the hallway feed. I looked at it and then turned the screen toward Derek. A plumber, I asked, my voice flat. Since when do plumbers carry a pinning kit and a key extractor? This man is wearing a shirt that says, Al's Lock and Safe. He is not here to fix a leak. Derek. He is here to drill out the cylinder. The room seemed to shrink. Marla Vaughan slowly set her wineglass down on the coffee table. The clinking sound was loud in the quiet room. She looked at her son, and for the first time, there was no adoration in her eyes. There was only the cold realization that she had been tricked. She had been brought here not as a guest, but as a prop to legitimize a theft. You made me an accomplice, Marla whispered, her voice shaking. You told me everything was signed. You told me this was done. Megan let out a sound that was half sob, half gasp. She was not crying because she was sad for me. She was crying because the illusion was shattering. She looked at her husband and saw the truth. She was not his partner. She was the Trojan horse he had used to get inside the gates. You used me, Megan said, tears streaming down her face. You did not want the view. You just wanted the deed. Derek's face twisted. The mask of the charming, successful husband fell away completely, revealing something ugly and desperate underneath. He turned on me, his eyes full of venom. Oh, stop the drama, Derek snapped. You are just a bitter, controlling old woman. You make $60,000 a year, Evelyn. You act like you are royalty, but you are a clerk. It is pathetic. I am ashamed to even be related to you by marriage. You are a fraud who hoards pennies and pretends to be high society. I stood my ground. I did not flinch. I did not scream. I never told you my salary, I said, looking him dead in the eye. Not because I was ashamed of the number. I hid it because I was afraid that if you knew what I made, you would treat me exactly like this. I hid it to protect myself from your snobbery, and it turns out I was right to be afraid. Miles stepped forward and placed a document on the kitchen island. It hit the granite with a heavy slap. "This is a formal notice to vacate," Miles said, his voice leaving no room for argument. "You have 2 hours to remove your personal effects and leave the premises. If you are still here at 8 o'clock, the sheriff will be called to remove you for trespassing." Derek laughed, but it was a brittle, hollow sound. "I will sue you for everything you have. I will sue you for defamation. You are humiliating me in front of my parents, and I will make you pay for every second of this. Defamation requires the statement to be false," I said, taking a step closer to him. "Just like the statements you made in the civil suit in Kingsport County 3 years ago. The ones about the unpaid contracts." Derek went pale. The blood drained from his face so fast he looked like a ghost. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. That is a lie," he finally stammered, but his voice lacked conviction. "You are making things up." Kingsport Gordon Hale spoke for the first time, his voice deep and rumbling. He looked at his stepson with narrowed eyes. "Derek," Marla said, her voice rising in panic. "What is she talking about? What are you hiding from us?" The power in the room had shifted. Derek looked at his parents, then at Miles, and finally at me. He realized he was losing control of the narrative. He turned his back to his parents and leaned in close to Megan. He grabbed her wrist, his fingers digging into her skin. He thought I could not hear him, or perhaps he did not care. "If you do not stand with me right now," he hissed, his voice low and dangerous, "you will lose everything. I will tell them about it. Megan, I will tell them everything." I could not close my eyes that night. The neon sign of the motel buzzed outside the window, casting a rhythmic red light across the cheap bedspread. It was 2 in the morning when I heard a soft knock at the adjoining door. I opened it to find Megan standing there. She looked like a child again, stripped of the pretenses and the designer clothes that Derek used to armor her against the world. She sat on the edge of the bed, her hands twisting together in her lap. "Mom?" she whispered, her voice cracking in a way that broke my heart. I think I made a mistake. I did not say I told you so." I handed her a bottle of water and sat beside her. "Tell me," I said. "Derek handles all the money?" Megan confessed, staring at the floor. "He told me I was too creative to worry about numbers. He brings me papers sometimes. He says they are for tax purposes or optimizing our portfolio. He puts little sticky notes where I need to sign. I never read them. I just trusted him." I felt a cold chill run down my spine. It was exactly as I had feared. I kept my voice even, suppressing the urge to shake her. "Megan, think back," I said gently. "Do you remember the time you told me your credit score dropped significantly? You were trying to lease that car last year." Megan froze. Her eyes widened as the memory connected with the present reality. "Yes," she said, her breath hitching. "It dropped 80 points right after the wedding." Derek said. He said it was a system error. He said the credit bureaus make mistakes all the time and he would fix it. I picked up the phone and called Miles, even though it was the middle of the night. He answered on the first ring, alert and ready. I put him on speaker. Megan had managed to take photos of a few documents she found in Derek's briefcase before she fled the townhouse. We sent them to Miles. "Evelyn?" Miles said after a few minutes of silence, his voice grim. "These are not tax documents. These are applications for unsecured lines of credit. And looking at the dates, he opened 3 accounts in Megan's name the week they got back from the honeymoon. I looked at my daughter. She was pale, her hand covering her mouth. I needed to be sure of the pattern. I dialed Tessa Blum again. "I am sorry to wake you," I said when she answered. "But did Derek ever use other people's names for debts all the time?" Tessa replied, her voice groggy but certain. "He called it temporary liquidity. He would use a junior partner's credentials to secure a loan, pay off a gambling debt or a bad investment, and then pay it back before anyone noticed. Until the one time he couldn't pay it back. That is when he started blaming us." My phone pinged with another message from Rita. It was a text from the night guard at the Harbour Point complex. "Saw Derek moving boxes in from the trunk of his car around midnight. Heavy boxes, marked archives. He is not moving furniture. He is moving paper." The picture was complete. This was never about a vacation home or a family retreat. The townhouse was a vault. Derek needed a physical location to store the paper trail of his fraud. A place that was technically in my name, but under his control. He was building a bunker for his secrets. "It is a web," I said, looking at Megan. "He has wrapped you in his debts, so you cannot leave." Megan began to shake. Tears spilled over her cheeks, hot and fast. "I can't leave him. Mum." She sobbed, her body curling in on itself. "He told me. He said if I ever tried to divorce him, he would release the emails." "What emails?" I asked. "From my old job." Megan gasped, struggling for air. "He has copies of things that make it look like I was stealing clients. He said he would send them to every firm in the city. He said I would never work again. I would be a pariah." She buried her face in her hands, trembling with the weight of the threat. It was a classic abuser's tactic. Isolate the victim, destroy their financial independence, and then hold their reputation hostage. I reached out and took her hands, pulling them away from her face until she had to look at me. I needed her to see the fire in my eyes. "You do not need to be ashamed," I said, my voice hard as steel. "The person who should be ashamed is the one who uses fear to tie you down." Miles moved with the ruthlessness of a general preparing for a final siege. We did not have time for sentiment. We needed to erect a legal firewall around Megan before Derek realized she had defected. The morning sun was barely hitting the pavement when we walked into the office of an independent credit consultant in downtown Wilmington. The consultant, a sharp woman named Mrs. Higgins, laid the report on the desk. It was a thick stack of paper, a physical representation of the shackles Derek had placed on my daughter. "You have 3 personal loans open," Mrs. Higgins said, pointing to the highlighted rows, totaling $45,000. All opened digitally. Megan stared at the paper. "I never applied for these." "Look at the dates," I said, tracing the line with my finger. October 12th, November 3rd, January 15th. Megan gasped. Those were the dates Derek was away on business. He said he was in Chicago and New York meeting investors. He was not meeting investors. He was sitting in a hotel room, using Megan's social security number to fund his lifestyle while she sat at home missing him. It was a cold, calculated betrayal. There was no violence, no raised fists, just the silent violence of theft. Miles took the report. This is enough for an emergency motion. I am filing for a temporary restraining order on the assets. We will freeze the joint accounts and petition to remove him from the townhouse pending the investigation. I did not wait for the court stamp. I drove straight back to Harbour Point. I hired a licensed security firm to replace every lock on the property. I had them install a new camera system with cloud backup that only I could access. I informed the building management that Derek Vaughan was no longer welcome on the premises. As I was supervising the installation of a deadbolt, my phone rang. It was Marla Vaughan. "Evelyn," she said, her voice stripped of its usual social veneer. "I need to see you. Not at the house. Somewhere neutral. I want the truth from someone who is not acting." We met at a small coffee shop on the edge of town. Marla looked 10 years older than she had the night before. She did not order anything. She just gripped her purse as if it contained the last of her dignity. "Gordon is furious," Marla said quietly, "but he is not surprised." "Why not?" I asked. Marla looked out the window, avoiding my eyes. 5 years ago, Derek used Gordon's name to secure a business loan. It was for a venture that did not exist. He almost bankrupted us. We caught him. But we covered it up. We paid the debt to save the family name. We thought he had learned his lesson. We thought he had changed. I understood then. Derek was not afraid of being yelled at. He was not afraid of a divorce. He was terrified of the pattern being exposed. He was a serial predator who relied on the silence of his victims to maintain his facade of success. If we connected the dots between what he did to Gordon, what he did to his former colleagues, and what he was doing to Megan, he would be finished. He relies on shame. I told Marla, "He thinks you will stay silent to protect your reputation. He thinks Megan will stay silent to protect hers. But I have nothing to lose. Marla, I am just a government worker with a salary of $60,000. I have no reputation to protect. So I am dangerous to him." Marla nodded slowly. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. It was an apology. I went back to the motel where Megan was waiting. She was pacing the room, but she looked stronger. The tears were gone, replaced by a cold resolve. "I am going to end this," Megan said. I asked him to meet me at Linden and Coast, the restaurant by the water. Public place. Miles will be there at a separate table. "Are you sure?" I asked. "I need him to admit it," Megan said. "I need him to look me in the eye when I serve him the papers." It was set. The trap was laid. But as I was gathering my things, my phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Derek. "You think you have won, don't you? You think you can turn her against me. Go ahead. But remember, I know everything. I have something that will make Megan turn her back on you forever." I stared at the screen. He was cornered, and like any trapped animal, he was preparing to bite. Linden and Coast was the kind of restaurant where the lighting was dim enough to hide secrets and the noise level was high enough to bury an argument. I sat at a small table near the kitchen, shielded by a large decorative plant. Miles was seated 2 tables away, his back to the wall, nursing an iced tea. We were the audience to a play that Derek thought he was directing. Derek walked in 10 minutes late. He looked immaculate in a navy blazer, checking his watch with a practiced air of business. He sat down opposite Megan, who was clutching her menu like a shield. He did not apologize for being late. He smiled, a sad, patronizing smile that was designed to disarm. "Megan," Derek said, reaching for her hand across the white tablecloth. I am glad you agreed to talk. This whole situation, it is getting out of hand. Your mother. She is poisoning us. She is hiring lawyers, defaming me, trying to destroy a family because she is lonely. It is tragic, really. Megan pulled her hand away. She placed the credit report on the table. I am not here to talk about my mother, Megan said, her voice shaking slightly but gaining strength. I am here to ask why there are $45,000 in loans taken out in my name on dates when you were supposedly out of town. Derek laughed. It was a soft, incredulous chuckle. Honey, he said, leaning back. We are married. What is mine is yours, and what is yours is mine. That is how a partnership works. You are getting worked up over paperwork. This is not paperwork, Megan said, pushing the paper closer to him. This is identity theft. You signed my name. Derek's expression shifted. The warmth evaporated, replaced by the cool arrogance of a man who believed he could talk his way out of a murder. It was an investment, Derek said, his voice lowering to a conspiratorial whisper. For our future. I was leveraging credit to secure a position that will pay off 10 times over. I did it for you, Megan. God, you sound just like her. Small-minded, afraid of wealth. I looked at Miles. I gave a single, sharp nod. Now. Miles stood up and walked over to their table. He did not say a word. He simply dropped a heavy manila folder onto the table between them. It landed with a thud that made the silverware rattle. Who is this? Derek demanded, though I saw the flicker of recognition in his eyes. We have the court records from Kingsport County, Miles said, his voice projecting clearly over the din of the restaurant. And we have the sworn affidavits from your former colleagues regarding the unauthorized use of their credentials to secure temporary loans. It is a pattern, Mr. Vaughan. And now we have proof you have done the exact same thing to your wife. Derek looked at the folder. He did not open it. He knew what was inside. His face flushed a deep, ugly red. He looked at Megan, and for the first time, he realized his charm was not going to work. He decided to burn the bridge. You want to talk about proof, Derek hissed, leaning across the table, his eyes wide and manic. Fine. Let's talk about proof. I have the emails. Megan, I have the emails from your old firm, the ones where you forwarded client lists to your personal account. The ones that prove you were soliciting business on the side. If I release those, you will never work in this city again. You will be finished. Megan gasped. She shrank back into her chair, her face draining of color. She looked terrified. She believed him because she did not know any better. I stood up. I walked the 10 steps to their table. Derek looked up, startled to see me there. He sneered, expecting me to scream or cry. I work at Northbridge Federal Benefits Coordination, I said. My voice was calm, steady, and loud enough for the tables nearby to hear. I process thousands of documents a week. I spend 8 hours a day verifying digital signatures and tracing communication logs. I looked down at him with nothing but pity. I know what a spoofed header looks like. Derek. I continued. I know how to read the metadata of an email to see where it really originated and if the timestamp was altered. I know that you cannot fake a server route to a federal employee who has been auditing digital trails since before you owned your first suit. Derek went pale. His mouth opened, but no words came out. He had always dismissed me as a simple woman with a $60,000 salary. He never stopped to think about what I actually did to earn it. He thought I filed paper. He did not know I analyzed lies for a living. I held out my hand. "Give me the phone," I commanded. "If those emails are real, open the source code right now and show me the routing path. Show me the IP address." Derek stared at my open hand. His grip on his phone tightened until his knuckles turned white. For the first time since I had known him, the look in his eyes was not arrogance. It was pure, unadulterated fear. Derek handed me the phone with a trembling hand. He had no choice. I tapped the screen, opening the details of the damning email he claimed to possess. It took me less than 30 seconds to find the cracks. The subject line had a spacing error that only occurred when a message was copy-pasted into a new draft. The timestamps on the thread did not match the server relay codes in the metadata. It was a clumsy forgery, stitched together to look like a conversation that never happened. "This is a draft," I said, sliding the phone back to him across the table. "It was never sent from her server. You edited the body text and forwarded it to yourself to create a fake trail. You just tried to blackmail your wife with a document you forged." Miles did not miss a beat. He opened his notebook and made a sharp, deliberate note. "Extortion, combined with the use of falsified documents to coerce a financial settlement," Miles stated, his voice devoid of emotion. "That significantly strengthens our petition for a protective order and the freezing of all marital assets." Derek realized the walls were closing in. He adjusted his tie, his eyes darting between me and Megan. He dropped the aggressive posture and lowered his voice to a whisper, trying to salvage a deal. "Look," Derek said, leaning in. "We can make this go away. Just sign over a share of the townhouse to Megan. Just put her name on the deed. If you do that, I will delete everything. I will walk away from the credit disputes. We can handle this like family." I looked at him, and for the first time in years, I did not feel small. "I used to hide my salary because I was afraid of being looked down on," I said clearly. "But I understand now. You did not look down on me because of the number. You looked down on me because you thought I would stay silent. You thought I was weak enough to be robbed." Megan stood up. Her chair scraped against the floor. A loud, definitive sound. She took the pen Miles offered her. She did not look at Derek with love, and she did not look at him with fear. She looked at him like he was a stranger. "I am not afraid of you anymore," Megan said. She signed the power of attorney documents, granting Miles the authority to lock down her credit and sever Derek's access to her financial life. "You are making a mistake," Derek shouted, standing up and knocking his water glass over. "You are listening to this bitter old woman instead of your husband." "She is listening to the truth," a voice said from the entrance. Derek froze. He turned to see Marla and Gordon standing there. Miles had arranged for them to arrive exactly at this moment. They had heard the shouting. They had seen the desperation. "Mom," Derek said, his voice cracking. "They are lying to you. They are trying to ruin me." Marla walked up to him. She looked at the spilled water, the legal papers, and the terror in her son's eyes. "We covered for you with the business loan," Marla said, her voice shaking with disappointment. "We thought we were protecting the family, but you are not using the family as a shield anymore. Derek, I will not cover for you. You are on your own." Derek looked around the restaurant. The patrons were staring. The evidence was on the table. The camera footage, the credit reports, the forged emails, and his own parents. Everything was against him. He slumped back into his chair, defeated. Under Miles's supervision, He signed the temporary agreement to vacate the Harbour Point property immediately. He had no leverage left. 2 hours later, the locks were changed. The sun was setting over the water, casting a golden light on the balcony of my townhouse. Megan was sitting beside me, holding a cup of tea, watching the waves roll in. She was safe. "Mom," she said softly, "you really make $60,000 a year?" I smiled, taking a sip of my tea. "Yes," I said. "It is not a fortune. It is not what Derek would call success, but it is mine, and I will not let anyone make me feel like I have to ask permission to exist." Thanks so much for listening to my story. I'd love to know where you guys are tuning in from. So please drop a comment below and let me know your city or country, and tell me what you would have done if you were in my shoes. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that like button. Smash the hype button to help more people find this video, and don't forget to subscribe to Nora Revenge Stories for more real-life drama. See you in the next one.